ChatGPT, they reached 1 million users within 5 days. And that also drives governance and that drives organizations to set guardrails in what you can and cannot do because everyone wants to use it.
Floris de Wit, Legal Director at DLA Piper, and Martijn Duijvestijn, Legal Counsel at Rabobank, unpack the EU AI Act, risk tiers, governance, and how in-house and outside counsel team up to deploy AI safely and compliantly.
We launched a research report 2 years ago, and one of the outcomes was that everyone had FOMO. They thought they were behind, and that also drove the desire to implement that new technology.
Indeed, and there's also the flip side, because you also want to encourage people to experiment, to learn in a responsible manner with AI. So that also forces a bank to educate what can I share and how can I use generative AI.
What are the most important things for Rabo regarding AI from a legal perspective in, say, the next year?
The typical answer of a legal counsel, make sure that you're following the regulation, the guidance and everything that's there. That's only one part of it. The other part, the Agentic AI element as mentioned earlier on. Of course, also within the bank we're looking at it and we will take steps in the coming months.
To make sure that Agentic AI is implemented in the right way and safe.
And of course, we also need to mitigate the risks around it, but that will happen in the coming months.
Is that also something that you are seeing for us, that Agentic AI is going to be the next big thing in this sector, but maybe even broader for the clients and the companies that you're advising?
I think
Let's start with some outcomes for listeners. I mean, we will talk for 25, 30 minutes. Floris, what will listeners gain from listening to this conversation that we will have?
I hope they will learn how we collaborate, how we work together, what type of matters we're working on, and share some insights in what that brought us.
Yeah. Martijn, any things you think like listeners will gain this from listening to this episode?
Yeah, of course, what a legal counsel within a financial service is doing with AI, what the challenges are, and of course the collaboration between in-house legal counsels and external lawyers like Floris at DLA.
Yeah, and maybe important, Martijn, we will not go in depth what Rabobank is doing with AI. We will touch on some examples, but this is not going to be an episode where we will discuss all the KYC AI systems that you have and that we go from step by step, how does it all work? I mean, we will talk about the legal aspects, but I think that's important to mention, that we will not do a deep dive on those matters.
No, indeed, and of course, more than happy to elaborate on the day-to-day challenges related to AI governance, regulation, policy standards, practical approach taken, but indeed not in depth on use cases. What we always tell is that also around the KYC and financial economic crime, there are also things that you don't want to mention. You also don't tell a carjacker where the auto keys are, or the car keys are.
No.
So of course I have to be a bit hesitant in what can be shared and what not. But especially related to public regulation, there can be shared a lot around that, I think.
Yeah, let's start with AI within Rabobank, say in the last 24 months. I mean, we had the launch of ChatGPT a few years ago. That sparked, of course, a crazy hype in the world, a crazy momentum. Everyone, I don't know how it was for you, Floris, but when ChatGPT launched, I got so many messages from people who said, like, did you already try this?
Yeah.
What did you do with ChatGPT? And then, of course, the next steps were businesses were evolving on it, where like, okay, we need to do something with AI. How is it within Rabobank for, say, the last few years? Did you really see a change, Martijn, in how they look at AI and what they are doing with it within the bank?
Yeah, I think, of course, it depends on how you define AI, but of course, modeling practices are common within banks for many years. But it goes without saying that ChatGPT made a difference in how banks look at AI applications.
What kind of difference?
Of course, it's way more available. As a bank also, we have seen so many examples of employees using ChatGPT in a manner where you think, yeah, are we secure that confidential data isn't leaked by what we then call shadow IT? And how do we educate our employees what can be used and what can be not
Because you don't want to have that employees are loading in details of clients into ChatGPT and have no idea to which service it's going, or it's maybe going to America, or is it staying in Europe, and what is happening with all that data. That's of course very important to educate everyone within a bank on how to use these new systems and how to use this technology.
Yeah, and indeed. And there's also of course also the flip side, because you also want to encourage people to experiment, to learn in a responsible manner with AI. So that also forces a bank to educate what can I share and how can I use generative AI. And that also depends on what kind of systems are available and are allowed to be used within the bank. And of course, always subject to the privacy security requirements that we as bank have for, I think, many years.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when ChatGPT launched, other than with other novel technologies, everyone immediately adopted this. Everyone wanted to use it. And I think ChatGPT, they reached 1 million users within 5 days.
Yeah.
And other platforms, it took months for them.
And I think
to
100 million
number.
users in 60 days.
Exactly. So that huge adoption rate, or that fast adoption rate, I think that's really different with AI compared to other technologies. Yeah, and that also drives governance, and that drives organizations to set guardrails in what you can and cannot do, because everyone wants to use it. And we launched a research report already 2 years ago. And one of the outcomes was that everyone had FOMO. Everyone, they thought they were behind. They thought everyone was doing more than they are. And that also drove sort of the desire to implement that new technology.
I mean, FOMO can be good because it makes sure that you invest in it, and you allocate sources, you allocate people to really make sure that this technology is used. But it can also be a bit dangerous also on the legal side, because maybe you're going to take some risks because you want to go fast where you maybe need to, go slow.
That's true. And I think that's part of our role. So often the business sees the opportunities.
And the lawyer needs to say
we
no.
are trained to spot risks.
Yeah.
But you need each other. And
but can you share more about, you were already working with Rabobank, I think, before the whole AI movement came up. And then AI is coming. And I think the questions that Rabobank has for you are also changing then.
Yeah, so what I like about the relationship of working with Martijn. So Martijn has been working on AI matters already for years, way before the AI Act was adopted. So already in the legislative process, we've been in touch to discuss what's happening.
And maybe good for the listeners, the AI Act is the first worldwide law. It's a European law for every European country, where you have a lot of regulation regarding AI. It's using a risk system with some risk scores. It's quite a difficult law. If you read it, you see 18 different other laws which you need to read to understand an article.
Yeah.
But that's really about AI regulation in Europe, that law.
Correct. And the law is new. The technology is new. There are many open norms in that law. And that's, for example, an area where we work together and where it's helpful that you have already a lot of background from the legislative process and working with the technology already for years. In understanding what that means, and especially understanding what the practical implications are of that law. This is the open norm, but what do we do to address it?
Yeah, but Martijn, you are legal counsel. Why do you need a lawyer to understand the law?
The law wasn't there out of the open at a certain moment. Of course, there's a process behind that where also background and ideas are derived from, and it's helpful to understand what are your sources, what is your knowledge about that legislative process. And of course, there's also a huge added value in understanding the entire landscape, and especially what are other banks across the world doing with this difficult to interpret piece of legislation, but also cross-sectoral, because this AI Act is not only for banks, also manufacturers have also to deal with it. And to a certain extent, some articles are applicable to them as well. Then, of course, the cross-sectoral or the view of a law firm like DLA and especially knowledge of Floris really helps in understanding better what's the background, what's the idea, and what our not necessarily peers or competitors, but what's the rest of the landscape doing with this legislation.
So I want to hear more about this in a moment, but the way you work together, for me, it feels quite interesting because every week or every month, for a few hours, you are part of the team of Rabobank. You are there at the office. Is it digital? How does working together work in such a matter?
There are different ways that we work together. It can be part of the team.
Is that normal?
We do that with other clients sometimes too. Yeah, but it's nice to be sort of part of that team, and I sense what I like about Rabo. There's this culture of collaboration and a form of authenticity that I like about working with Martijn and with the broader team. But it can also just be ad hoc questions or advising on matters like open source or negotiation strategies. There are different players in the value chain, and there are different ways of implementing AI, and each different model comes with different legal questions, and sort of guiding and navigating together what the best way for you is. Those are different forms of working together.
Yeah, but how is it for you, Martijn, you have different forms of working together? I can imagine that it's very nice if someone is part of the team for a few hours a week. It's different from ad hoc questions where you just call and, hey, we need an answer now. How is that different in working together?
Now, of course, it always depends on what the activities we as a legal team within Rabobank has to execute. To give an example, as part of the implementation process with legislation within Rabobank, we are used to do some sort of a page turner. So going through all the articles and try to understand what does it mean and
together,
what does it even apply to us. And of course, it's really helpful to have someone within the team to review also that work, to be available for questions, and especially if there's proven knowledge about the technology, but also, as mentioned earlier on, around the early start of the legislative process.
Yeah, so and what other banks and other players in the sector are doing with this legislation and how they are using it to make sure that everything is going according to the rules.
Indeed, and
or outside the sector.
Or outside the sector, because that's also knowledge that you have, Floris. Also outside of the banking sector, you have a lot of technology knowledge, but you see a lot of companies and you can give some insights. I mean, I think you cannot share everything with Rabo, but you can share some insights on, hey, we see that this company is doing this company is doing this. Maybe it's interesting for you to also do this.
So ultimately, the AI Act is about product safety. So the life science sector, for example, is very used to product safety types of legislation, and AI in life science is also a big topic, and they're also quite innovative and ahead of the game. So it can be interesting to also look at other sectors, what they are doing, how they are implementing the requirements from those pieces of legislation, and then see how that would pan out in other sectors.
And is it also sharing knowledge about more the business side? So let's say not only the legal side, but also the business side of how they implement AI more in general?
So I mean, there are parallels in, for example, governance and about implementing guardrails. That are not necessarily sector specific.
And of course, you also need to know that the legislation is one part, but there are multiple elements relevant in AI implementation, as mentioned earlier, on privacy, cybersecurity.
So many
of
different
course,
topics.
The AI Act. There are so many different topics, and you also have the sectoral, the existing sectoral legislation, what's already applicable to a bank, and how does the AI Act interfere with that. Then, of course, the vendor and the contracting element. So it are lots of pieces that are coming together. And to give an example, DLA hosted a training for a part of the Rabobank legal team, and they brought in 3 different lawyers with 3 different backgrounds, but all very relevant and basically required to understand AI governance, and AI implementation. So having that available is also very helpful, and I think also needed to understand the full spectrum of AI.
And Floris just mentioned, Martijn, you were already working in AI already before ChatGPT was launched. I mean, for a big part of the world, ChatGPT was, oh, this is AI, but of course AI is way older than ChatGPT. I think it's already invented in 1970 or 1960, and there were already a lot of developments. So you were also already working with AI within Rabo before ChatGPT launched. What were you doing with AI before ChatGPT?
Of course, AI is there for quite some years, but the guardrails or the background of AI, is it new? So also be involved in the legislation from a very early starting point was very helpful, or very much needed.
That gives you very valuable insights in how this legislation will work out.
And also steer it from the start. I mean, like 6 years ago, as a Dutch financial sector, we already published position papers responding to the ethical guidelines that were issued from Brussels. And then we really argued for, we need at least a risk-based regulation. That was 6 years ago, and now we see that risk level pyramid from the AI Act. Yeah, of course, it's very helpful because it totally varies where AI is used for in terms of regulation and compliance efforts.
But did ChatGPT change your work in the sense that AI is now always at the foreground of everything that you're doing? And before it was maybe more like, hey, I'm working on AI. And we're like, AI? What is AI?
Yeah, of course. And when we're talking about AI, most people tend to think ChatGPT is AI.
Exactly.
But that's only a subset of AI, of course. That's generative AI. Now, of course, before ChatGPT, we focused on, so to say, narrow AI, more focusing on predictions. And then ChatGPT, the generative AI wave came up. But of course, it doesn't stop or it doesn't end there. Agentic AI is on the horizon, and it also requires legal counsels to understand what is this and what is it different than generative.
Agentic AI means that an AI can do things without, I mean, you giving the assignment and then it works for 20 hours on a job, and you check after 20 hours if it worked out, and that will go further and further and further. What I always think is interesting, Floris, also with collaboration between a law firm and a big client, how's the value measured of your advice, of the things you're doing? For me, that's always a bit of a black box. How's it for you? How do you measure your value that you are giving to a client?
I think the main element is, can they actually use our input? Is it not just explaining what the law is, but also, and this is what you should do? And I think sort of the practical translation.
How do you make sure it's practical?
Yeah, to just think a step further than just reading what the law says and interpreting the law, but also understanding the landscape within the client, within Rabo, how they use it, how they operate, and then trying to take that extra step. And this is what it means in practice. And that's a joint effort.
Yeah, really understand the business side also of Rabo.
And the broader strategy. What's our risk appetite? What's our perspective? Where are we heading to? And taking that into account in your advice.
Risk appetite. Does your advice change if a company says, hey, we have a very low risk appetite or we have a very high risk appetite?
Yeah, essentially, yes. Yeah.
So if you have a startup, let's say we have a startup here, want to take a lot of risks, you're like, okay, you need to be cautious here, but you can do it. And if Rabo comes here and they say, we don't want to take risk at all, your advice will be different.
Yeah, so indeed, and the example of a startup is good. They have a different risk appetite, often in a different sector, and then the risk profile is different, and that does it doesn't impact the risks we advise on, But you think along with your client in how to best mitigate those risks within that risk appetite.
Yeah. Martijn, is that just,
And understand also the broader picture. A startup, not being a bank, is also subject to totally different regulation and than a bank.
A bank is very highly regulated.
Yeah.
Indeed, but that's of course understanding also that type of regulation, how that interferes with the AI Act, how that's different or also relevant. That's of course a requirement of the advice given. I mean, and an advice without taking all the existing sectoral legislation into account isn't valuable. So also that element needs to be understood and needs to be part of the advice as well. Otherwise, it's valuable to us.
Yeah, and also, for example, in contract negotiations, you can spot a legal risk and address it legally, but sometimes you can address a risk within the technology and using the technology as a risk mitigator. We always try to look at it more holistically and not just look at the law, but also just look at how is this risk mitigated.
Maybe a strange question, but do you like the AI Act also because of the risk system?
As a lawyer, yes. I think it makes sense, the risk-based approach.
Yeah. Martijn, I think for a lot of listeners, they hear you are a legal counsel at Rabobank, you are working with AI, you're doing all kind of legal things, but maybe it's hard for them to imagine how your day-to-day job looks like. Can you share a bit more about what you are doing as a legal counsel within one of the biggest banks in the Netherlands?
Yeah, making sure that especially the AI Act is implemented properly. I mean, it's lots of articles, also resulting in lots of questions. But what we've seen also is supplementary guidance, for instance, on prohibited practices. It was a very long document with lots of pages, but also very relevant for the bank. So that's also where we collaborated on. But having an idea of what's in there, what does the legislator meant with all these articles, that's part of the work I do on a daily basis. But also responding to consultations and trying to steer the debate and to influence where possible and addressing challenges like a vague or difficult to interpret definition of an AI system. That's also what we try to bring further to also legislators, supervisors, etc.
Let's say there's someone within Rabo, some people, and they say, hey, we developed a system for KYC, AI KYC system. Then they come to you and they ask, can we use this? Is this usable within the AI Act? That's it. I mean, this is very black and white, but
but of course not specifically on this matter. But I receive questions on: is this a high risk practice? Yes or no? And is this an AI system? Yes or no? Exactly that type of questions are really difficult, but that are the type of questions that end up on the desks of a legal counsel.
And then sometimes you call Floris and you're like, hey, I got this question. How can we make sure that this is working within the AI Act?
And of course, then you also try to get a bit of an understanding what's going on elsewhere, and there the support of Floris is valuable to understand what's going on with peers or in other sectors.
Yeah, because Floris, that's interesting. I mean, DLA Piper is at the forefront of technology worldwide. I think on a daily basis, you have more than 100 people working on tech here, working on AI, working on all kind of tech matters. So there's a lot of knowledge within this firm about all these new technologies.
Yeah, and I benefit from that, but not only me personally, the team. Benefits from that. I definitely don't do this alone. I have a strong team here working with me on these matters, but also internationally. And you definitely see that there are worldwide and geopolitical influences, influencing the legislative landscape.
Of course, there's a difference between the US. There is a difference between the US and the EU, I mean, also with regulation. And that's, of course, also important for clients that you have who are operating worldwide.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you capture all that knowledge? I mean, you have people everywhere in the world working on AI or other technologies? How do you make sure that that knowledge is shared also with you when someone in America has, I don't know, very interesting insight, and you're like, oh, but that's for me, that's good to know. How do you make sure that that's shared in a good way?
We have working groups. We have knowledge hubs. So we regularly share advice and upload that in a repository, so we can all benefit. We have email groups. So if we get a novel question, then you can reach out to your peers, and potentially someone has already advised on that, or people can share insights. So there's a very collaborative spirit, and especially in these novel terrains, that's super useful.
Yeah, and Martijn, at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned we will not do a deep dive in what is Rabobank doing with AI, but maybe it's nice to give some examples of how AI changed the business of Rabobank and how you were also involved in making sure that it was all implemented in the right way. Do we have a few examples of things that maybe clients already are seeing in their daily, I don't know, basis with interacting with the bank, for example?
I think in client and interactions, it's even more important to be cautious. We have all seen the examples of chatbots going in the totally wrong direction. Air Canada is one of the best examples.
What is the example of Air Canada?
Yeah, a chatbot promising huge discounts.
Nice.
And of course, the judge ordered Air Canada to provide the tickets with the discounts. But the discounts were an idea of the chatbot, but not based on the policy around it. So something broke there, resulting in damages. So for chatbots with what we call customer-facing applications, it's important to be very cautious with. But of course, we also look into chatbots for internal documents and also productivity tooling, summarization tooling, to make sure that personal efficiency of employees within the bank could increase.
Which speeds up your work also.
Indeed. Also, as a legal counsel, I always say you have to understand and use technology as well to be able to advise on. So, of course, also as a legal counsel, you have to embrace AI, because otherwise, you can't advise even, and you're not even relevant, I think.
How did you embrace AI, Floris, in your work?
By using the tooling that DLA makes available.
And that is?
It's Copilot. We develop tools ourselves for internal use, but also for clients. And it's a continuous journey.
Do you also educate your clients on using these kind of tools?
I do sometimes provide trainings to legal teams on what the risks are, which are essentially not very different from other use cases, but then applied to legal teams, and then navigate them through how does the technology work, what are good use cases, how can you use it, and how can you make sure to use it responsibly.
And that's also something DLA Piper is doing every year. You have a tech summit every year where you share like practical insights with a big group of people. And in your case, those are insights from different kind of clients, different technologies. But that's a very interesting way of sharing information with a broader audience.
The tech summit you're referring to is not a legal tech thing. It's more a piece
broad.
of thought leadership around technology. But technology is everywhere and is everything and is impacting all different markets. So energy, private equity and investments, financial services. So the summit is focused on having people at the forefront explaining what they have been doing, so that the audience understands the journey they have been through and learn from that.
Martijn, for say the next few years or you now go on a trip for 2 months, and then after 2 months you are back and you're back into the whole AI race again. What are the most important things for Rabo regarding AI from a legal perspective in say the next year?
Yeah, of course, and that's the typical answer of a legal counsel. Make sure that you're following the regulation, the guidance, and everything that's there. But I think that's only one part of it. The other part keep understanding technology. We've seen so many changes in such a rapid pace.
It's going very fast.
It's going very fast, and it's very important to be relevant and also be up to date and have your knowledge available on what's happening with the technology.
So if you are now going away for 2 months, you're still reading everything about all this development?
I can't promise that. I'm very happy that my colleagues will.
And then you come back and then they give you updates about everything that happened. So you're back at pace at very fast.
Yeah, no, but the Agentic AI element, as mentioned earlier on, of course, also within the bank, we're looking at it and we will take steps again, in a very cautious way, but we will take steps in the coming months also
to make sure that Agentic AI is implemented in the right way and safe.
Of course, always safe and responsible, but it's relevant. There are opportunities there. And of course, we also need to mitigate the risks around it. But that will happen in the coming months, I know for sure, and also in the coming years.
Is that also something that you were seeing, Floris, that Agentic AI is going to be the next big thing in this sector, but maybe even broader for the clients and the companies that you're advising?
Yeah, certainly. That is sort of talk of the town these days. Yeah, it's
and
the
what
biggest,
we can do with
trend.
Agentic AI and how we make sure that it's legally responsible to implement it.
What are the parameters in which the agents can operate, etc. Yeah.
Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say about this topic, about AI, about technology, about working together as a big bank and a big law firm?
Yeah, what I really appreciate from DLA is also the knowledge that they share also on the internet. But also, what I really like is the EU AI Act app. I really use it frequently to have it on my cell phone.
Can I also use it? Or
of course, and it's perfect that you can see which article is where. It's very helpful, and also having the recitals available quite soon. Having that, that's also using technology as a lawyer to your own advantage, and that's really helpful. And then, of course, there are lots of helpful series, video series, accelerators, what I really like. So that's also, there's a
lot of content about all these topics where they share a lot of information and insights about, for example, this new law. And I think, Floris, you will keep doing that in the future.
100%.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you both for this conversation. And Martijn, enjoy your trip.
Thank you. I will for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. A big thank you to my guest, Floris de Wit, Legal Director at DLA Piper, and Martijn Duijvestijn, Legal Counsel at Rabobank, for a clear, no-nonsense look at how AI moves from policy to practice. If this sparked ideas for your own team, whether you are in-house, at a firm, or somewhere in the ecosystem, share the episode with a colleague who should hear it. And if you have questions or want us to dive deeper next time, let us know. I'm Hidde Bruinsma. Thanks for listening from the DLA Piper office in Amsterdam. Until next time, and innovate responsibly.